Thank you. Joining us now for more is a voice of experience and retired General Charles Wald of the U.S. Air Force, former Deputy Commander of U.S. European Command, who has quite a resume. The general has served in combat as a forward air controller in Vietnam, as an F-16 pilot in the skies over Bosnia, also served as an F-15 flight commander and helped to develop the air campaign for Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. He joins us now live on Bloomberg TV and radio. General, thank you for being with us. You've heard the reporting and the analysis there from Bloomberg Economics, and it's pretty remarkable what we have learned, especially when it comes to the most expensive precision weaponry. As you just heard Becca talking about, more than half of our advanced Patriot variant, 40% of the terminal high-altitude area defense interceptors. I'm curious, do we have other less sophisticated munitions to help make up the difference?
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Joe and Kaylee. Absolutely, we do. And, we use those weapons. I say the United States, use those weapons early on in the campaign to take out the Iranian military capacity to both reach out to the GCC countries and Israel, as well as to attack U.S. forces that are stationed in the region, as well as threaten aircraft that are going to fly in the region. And it's better to send an unmanned weapon when you can. But you've probably seen all the film that the Department of War has sent out. It's black and white. That means it's being filmed by infrared cameras at night. Those are Joint Direct Attack Munition weapons most of the time. Those aren't, matter of fact, we have a lot of those, and it's a great weapon. I've dropped them myself. Very accurate, 2,000 pounds. You see some of the film right here. So, Again, I don't want to trivialize the fact that we've expended some of our weapons, but if you look at the numbers, it's about what you'd expect from a combat campaign, that you're going to destroy the capacity of a pretty sophisticated, in this case, adversary in the IRGC from the standpoint of weaponry they had. So I don't want to trivialize it, but I think it's being made a little bit too much of. And number two is, and you've seen this in Congress, where they're increasing the defense spending. $1.5 trillion is breathtaking from a defense budget. And the amount of Patriot, THAAD, Becca talked about a minute ago, it's going to increase by sometimes threefold, sometimes fourfold. So, again, if China wanted to do something stupid in Taiwan right now, they could. It probably going to be a little more difficult, but there are weapons in the Indochina region that haven't been used. And number two is people mentioned, and Russia might feel emboldened. By the way, Russia used to have the number 2 military in the world, and after they invaded the Ukraine, they're the number 2 military in Ukraine. They've expended most of their weapons. They're asking Korean troops to come help them. So I don't want to trivialize it, but I think we're in pretty good shape.
Well, I guess the big question, General, is whether it's impacting strategic decisions. You can argue about whether the exquisite form of weaponry plays a role when we're knocking down drones that cost a lot less. But is the president hamstrung when he's presented a menu of options because of this?
I don't think he feels hamstrung right now. I don't think, Brad Cooper is the commander on CENTCOM, the Navy admiral that's running the war for him. I think Brad Cooper probably would like to go in and take out every possible target he could in Iran. I think you have to be cautious. You can't just willy-nilly fire out Patriot PAC-3 or PRISM or TLAM or THAAD for whatever missile it is. As a matter of fact, they really don't need them right now. It's just like the weapons we used to take out the nuclear storage area in Isfahan back in June of 23. Or 24, I should say. But those weapons, the bunker busters, 30,000 pounders, are not very plentiful. So we have to be careful with things like that, too. But they've done their job. So, again, I don't want to trivialize it, but I think we're in good shape. I think we're in satisfactory shape. I think the diplomatic part, take that away from the military. That's not the military's job. That's a different issue. But from a military standpoint, I think they're doing great.
Well, so if you think that we're okay as we are now, General, we're, of course, maintaining actively a U.S. naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz with no sign as to when that will end, no sign, frankly, as to when the strait may open, if not forced to. Would the United States be able, as it stands now, to provide the necessary air cover to secure the passage of commercial vessels through the strait for an indefinite period of time in absence of a negotiated deal?
Simple answer is yes. I mean, again, you can't have the military get worn out necessarily, but we've got a pretty good sized military. It isn't going to take the entire Air Force or any other service, and Navy in this case, to do the mission. I'm a advocate of escort mission through the Straits of Hormuz. We did that, the United States, in the mid '80s. Ernest Will was the name of the mission. We escorted ships in and out of the Straits of Hormuz with naval assets. And as you pointed out, Kaylee, the air cover, we can do this indefinitely from the standpoint of air cover. There's a very small portion of our forces in the Middle East right now from the standpoint of Air Force and Navy for that matter. So again, I don't want to trivialize it. I'm sure, if I'm Brad Cooper, I'd like to have more assets. But I personally feel sincerely that we're in pretty good shape and we can do any mission you ask us to do.
It's pretty interesting knowing that we heard from the Energy Secretary today they're getting 9 million barrels out with these overnight missions, apparently. But, of course, we remember the last time the U.S. had to stand up a no-fly zone, General. Have the rules changed knowing that we're in the age of drone warfare now?
Well, from a no-fly zone standpoint, no. I mean, I think, again, it's you hate to see a very expensive AMRAAM missile taking out a crummy little $50,000 Iranian drone, but I've flown a lot of no-fly zone missions. They don't have an indefinite supply of drones. The Russians, again, are, they've used a lot of their assets in Ukraine, even though it's still an ongoing battle. But I don't think it's as bad as it sounds. I would, if I'm Brad Cooper and I had my AirCom commander tell me I can do a no-fly zone for you, of course the Navy would be a big part of that. I'd feel totally confident we could do that without running the force into the ground. I feel better than most people do about this. I hate the idea that we're continuing to fight. I think Iran should go away from the standpoint of military, but I think we're doing pretty good. I think the diplomatic side is very difficult.
Well, we've certainly seen diplomacy run into many roadblocks. General, I'd like to ask you about a separate story, but you may have some insight into it. We saw reporting in the Washington Post yesterday about Air Force One, the old Air Force One, effectively becoming the decoy plane as President Trump departed the NATO summit in Turkey earlier this year. He was taken off the plane in the catering truck, General, and flew on a separate aircraft. Reach 18, I believe, is what that aircraft was dubbed. Members of the administration, members of the press were still on board Air Force One and flew through Turkish airspace despite the threat that potentially seems that it was being posed on that aircraft. Would you have been comfortable flying that plane, riding on it? Should it ever have been able to get off the ground if the threat was that real that the president couldn't himself take that flight?
I wouldn't want to make a decision on whether he should fly in that aircraft or not. I'd feel comfortable flying in it. But I remember when the decision was made to replace the current Air Force One with the new set of 747-800s. And I knew the person in the White House that was running the program for replacing it. And that was over 8 years ago. It takes a long time to replace things on these aircraft. They're big. They need to be militarized from a certain standpoint, from a defensive countermeasure standpoint, both from electronic countermeasures as well as heat-seeking missiles. They have to have special communications on board. They have to have special exit capability on board. And that aircraft, again, I wouldn't argue whether it's the right thing to do that we have it or not, but we do have the aircraft, and it's going to take quite a while to modify it if they ever do that. So, ironically, I was asked the day this occurred by a different network. What I thought the reason was, I had not talked to anybody in the military or government, but my feeling was it was exactly what happened. They felt there might be a threat. They didn't think the aircraft was properly configured for that threat, and he changed to a different aircraft. So I think we're making a big deal of it. I think it's actually kind of clever the way they did it. But again, I don't blame them for changing out. I would have taken Air Force One in the first place.
Well, will they be able to ever do it again now that we know what the tactic was to get the president off in a clandestine way this time around? General, thank you so much.
By the way, on that point, no, because we're not going to put that aircraft in harm's way again. We learned lessons too.
All right, good point. Retired General Charles Wald, thank you so much for joining us on Balance of Power.